Why some of us cheat, even in good relationships. A Stoic answer to the craving we don't talk about. No one plans to cheat. And yet, so many of us find ourselves right there, at the edge of that choice, drawn to something or someone we didn't expect. It often doesn't begin with betrayal. It begins with boredom, with stillness, with a life that looks fine on the outside, but feels quietly wrong on the inside. And then the questions come. Why do I feel more alive around someone I barely know than with the person I promised everything to? What am I really chasing? And what am I trying to escape? We don't hear those questions answered without judgment, but the ancient Stoics had a different approach. They weren't interested in shame. They were interested in clarity. So today we're looking at modern relationships through Stoic eyes to understand the real roots of desire, disconnection, and self-deception. It's not a how-to guide, it's a mirror, and what it shows us might change the way we think about cheating and about ourselves. We don't talk about this enough. We can be in a relationship that's healthy, loving, secure, maybe even deeply meaningful, and still, we can find ourselves thinking about someone else. Not because we've stopped loving the person we're with, not because we're bad people or selfish or reckless, but because some part of us feels like it's fading, and we're looking for something or someone to bring us back into focus. We don't need shame for that. We need understanding. So what is this quiet craving actually about? Let's start where most people stop, the space between everything's fine and I might cheat, because that space is real and it's uncomfortable. It's where most emotional affairs begin. It's where we start justifying little secrets and where we start asking questions we don't say out loud. Questions like, why do I feel numb in something that's supposed to feel safe? Why do I feel more alive texting someone I barely know than talking to the person I live with? Marcus Aurelius once said, "You're not disturbed by the thing itself, but by your thoughts about it." In other words, it's not always the relationship that causes the ache. It's our reaction to what we think a relationship should feel like. And in a world that glamorizes excitement and speed, stillness often feels like a sign of failure, even when it's not. So if nothing's technically wrong, why do we feel like something is missing? It usually starts with a moment we didn't see coming. Someone pays us a compliment, someone flirts, and we flirt back, just a little. We laugh. It feels good, better than we expected, and it catches us off guard, not just because of what we feel, but because of how quickly we feel it. That lightness, that spark, it's addictive, because for a second, we get to be someone else. Not the exhausted partner, not the default version of ourselves, but someone fresh, seen, exciting again. It's tempting to think this means we've found the right person, but often what we found is a version of us we haven't felt in a while. That's what Stoicism teaches us to investigate, not just the surface behavior, but the impulse underneath. Epictetus said freedom is not achieved by satisfying desire, but by eliminating it. And by eliminating, he didn't mean suppressing. He meant understanding it so clearly that it no longer controls us. So what are we actually craving when we start looking outside? For a lot of us, the answer is validation. That ache isn't always about sex or romance. It's about wanting to feel wanted, to be interesting again, desirable, not because we're shallow, but because we're starved. We're starved for acknowledgement, for variety, for some signal that we're still someone, not just a role we've been playing on repeat. And modern life doesn't help. We spend more time in shared Google calendars than in shared vulnerability. We know our partner's work schedule better than their fears. We stop flirting because it feels unnecessary. We stop asking deep questions because we think we already know the answers. And slowly, the intimacy starts dying. Not because we stopped loving, but because we stopped noticing. So when someone else sees us, we come alive. But what if that spark didn't have to come from someone else? Seneca said, "No man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity, for he is not permitted to prove himself." In other words, difficulty isn't a sign that something's broken. It's an opportunity to wake up and engage with more depth. We've been taught that if something gets hard, it's a sign to leave. But maybe it's a sign to look inward, to ask what part of us has gone quiet, to ask what we stopped communicating, not just with our partner, but with ourselves. And this is where Stoicism becomes so useful, because it teaches us that our inner peace can't depend on anything outside of us. Not on a perfect relationship, not on new attention, not even on constant desire. So if we're honest, are we chasing another person, or chasing a version of ourselves we forgot how to access? Let's talk about comparison, because that's its own poison. We see people online doing soft launches, romantic surprise trips, slow dancing on rooftops. And meanwhile, our version of intimacy is texting, "Can you grab oat milk?" while we both scroll in silence. It's easy to think we're doing something wrong, but here's what the Stoics understood long before Instagram: most of what we see is an illusion. They called it fantasia, false impressions, things that look like happiness from the outside but are empty up close. Epictetus said, "If you are pained by anything external, it is not the thing itself that causes the pain, but your judgment of it." So maybe the problem isn't the relationship. Maybe it's the standard we're measuring it against. Not love, but performance. And if we stop performing, what's left? There's this powerful idea in Stoicism called amor fati, love of fate. It doesn't mean tolerate what's hurting us. It means meet life where it is, not where we wish it would be. Zeno, the founder of Stoicism, lost everything in a shipwreck. And instead of falling apart, he said, "Now that I've been shipwrecked, I'm on a better journey." So what does that look like in a relationship? Maybe it means facing the hard stuff head on, the disconnection, the boredom, the fear that we're becoming strangers, and deciding to show up anyway, not with judgment, but with curiosity. Maybe it means asking, "Can I bring the best of myself here, instead of believing I'll only find it somewhere else?" Because cheating doesn't start with sex. It starts with disconnection, first from our partner, then from ourselves. And once we're disconnected, we start looking for someone to remind us who we are, to reflect something back that we miss, to save us from the flatness of our own reflection. But here's the hard truth: no one can do that for us, not sustainably. We have to return to ourselves first, not because we owe it to anyone else, but because that's the only way we can ever show up fully for someone else. So before we step outside the relationship, before we chase newness or intensity or attention, what if we asked, what am I avoiding inside myself? And even deeper, what would happen if I stopped running from that? If this made something click, not about cheating, but about craving, about what we're chasing and why we chase it, then you're already doing the hard part, seeing clearly. This isn't about guilt. It's about waking up to the truth of how we live and how we love. If you want more of that, real, grounded clarity through ancient ideas that still make sense today, subscribe. We'll keep asking better questions together.